The world's at a dangerous tipping point. You've got America, leader of the free world, in obvious decline. You've got China, the biggest dictatorship in history, on the rise, wanting to be top dog. And now, at this dangerous moment, the US gets a president who's obviously senile, who's catastrophically weak. I mean, it's hard to exaggerate how dangerously bad Joe Biden is, how closer to war we are as a result, when the US is led by a man so weak that he seems to doze off even during a meeting last week with Israel's Prime Minister. And just have a look at the last week. Biden's already had the Taliban take over Afghanistan after he suddenly pulled out all US troops, so fast that it actually left the Taliban a massive amount of US armoury, including up to 2,000 armoured vehicles and 40 aircraft and bundles of cash. Biden has already also left US allies trapped in Afghanistan because he failed to keep a secure US base in the country. And his officials were then left so dependent on Taliban security that they even, in a brainless moment, gave the Taliban a list of Afghan allies to help evacuate. A list that the Taliban can now use to find and punish those former enemies of it. And then last week came the suicide bomber who killed some 200 people at the airport, including 13 US troops. And Biden, by then, seemed broken. In his press conference after that tragedy, he even had the shame to hide behind his dead son, Beau, falsely implying that his son's war service had caused his fatal brain cancer. So, as a result, Biden then knew what those grieving families were going through, what it was to lose a son in action.
When he came home after a year in Iraq, was diagnosed, like many coming home, with an aggressive and lethal cancer of the brain. We lost. You get this feeling like you're being sucked into a black hole in the middle of your chest. There's no way out.
Now, when he finished that self-pitying, meandering, flustering kind of press conference, Joe Biden actually had to be told by his minders what next to say to the journalists there.
Ladies and gentlemen, they gave me a list here. The first person I was instructed to call on was Kelly O'Donnell of NBC.
Where is this man's mind? Here's the final insult. When the bodies of 11 of the 13 dead servicemen were flown back from Afghanistan to the US, Biden, good, he was there to meet them, but then openly checked his watch among the 13, as if he'd had better places to be. I mean, maybe bed for another nap. Now, I know these are just impressions. Maybe I've got even some things out of context. That's possible. But these images are what the world sees. And what they add up to is this: a picture of someone very weak and clueless. How much longer can US President Joe Biden go on? Because he's now, without doubt, in serious mental decline. This is from a speech to union bosses just last week.
And Don Finn, IBW, and Robert Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, You know, if I can digress for just a second, last night I was on the television. I was on the telephone, you know. At any rate, also we've got state leadership here. Lieutenant Governor Julius here, Stratton, and the Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania. The Illinois President of the Don Harmon, State Senator Laura Murphy, State Rep Martin Moylan, and we got great labor leaders here too.
And I've shown you plenty of early examples in other shows that suggest to me that Biden's going to struggle to serve out the rest of his 3.5-year term. But what makes this leadership crisis in the US worse is that the Vice President, Kamala Harris, is not just desperately inexperienced, never been governor of a state, for instance, but she's unfit to ever replace Biden as president, so it seems to me. And it's not just that when she's faced with a problem, she laughs nervously and steps back, not leans forward into it. For instance, Joe Biden tasked Harris to stop the huge inflow of illegal immigrants coming over the Mexican border. And Harris back then talked big about what she'd do.
I look forward to engaging in diplomacy with government.
But since then, Harris has visited the Mexican president just once to discuss this, and eventually, when she was shamed into it, visited the border too, but just once. And again, that nervous laugh whenever she's asked if she'll go again.
Plans to visit the border?
Not today, but I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
And here's a sign of how far Harris will run from a problem. Last Friday, Biden had top officials go to Mexico City to discuss this border crisis with Mexico. It was a top team, the Secretary of State, the Homeland Security Secretary, and the Attorney General, but no Kamala Harris, the border czar. She was instead out playing with children back home to soften her image.
What number?
Comes after 7, comes...
What comes after?
Comes... Yes!
Now, I want to clear up something. Now, it's usually said, like a cheap shot, politics, Joe Biden has got dementia. The oldest US president in history, he's losing it. But I reckon this issue is really too serious to treat like that, because I actually want to know. I know I want to know, so what if he has? If the leader of the free world does have dementia, how big an issue is it? Or perhaps just taking a few grabs, a few dozen pieces of video of Biden brain phase out of context. Pieces, video like this one.
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
Now, this all came to a head for me last week when Joe Biden did an hour-long question and answer on CNN. Now, for a lot of the time, and I don't think people have been fair on this point, there was no real trouble. No real trouble. He was answering fluently for him. But you couldn't ignore moments like these, for instance, answers to simple questions like, when will children under 12 get vaccinated?
And I've heard you speak about it because I'm not being solicitous, but you're always straight up about what you're doing. Yeah. And the question is whether or not we should be in a position where you why can't the experts say, we know that this virus is in fact, it's going to be, or excuse me, we know why all the drugs approved are not temporarily approved, but permanently approved.
America's top generals last night gave stunning evidence to a Senate hearing. Evidence confirming President Joe Biden is either a liar or that he's so confused now that his memory is shot. Either way, Biden is fast becoming the most embarrassing president in US history. And I wonder how much longer he can stay. Because this is actually worse than embarrassing, it's dangerous. When the United States last month suddenly abandoned Afghanistan, the chaos that caused was terrible. The Afghan government instantly collapsed. The Taliban extremists took over without a shot being fired. And in that chaos, the US left behind some 200 US citizens. And it also lost 13 military in an ISIS suicide bombing. And days later, Joe Biden was asked this question, and he lied or misremembered.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true.
Your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that.
No, no one said that to me that I can recall.
No one said that? Well, that turns out to be absolutely false. Last night, the general in charge of Afghanistan, the US operations there, he exposed that lie or that memory fail. He said that he had indeed asked for US soldiers, 2,500, to stay, And the US top general, Mark Milley, said the same.
I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. And I also recommended earlier in the fall of 2020 that we maintain 4,500 at that time. Those are my personal views. I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
And I do agree with that.
So Biden had lied, or simply could not remember the most critical advice given to him by at least 3 of those senior generals, advice that could have stopped the Taliban from totally conquering Afghanistan. And now that top general, Mark Milley, he said the result was that the fight against Islamist terrorism had just got harder because of this, more dangerous.
But we must continue to protect the United States of America and its people from terrorist attacks coming from Afghanistan. That mission will be much harder now.